Ethan Simon for $10 says, watch John Doyle's MLK video.
Maybe black people have basically just been using racism as an excuse for their behavior, which is why they pledge allegiance to the left. The essence of left-wing political thought is...
See, so already he's categorized black people as having a certain kind of behavior.
Right.
How is this not the same thing as white people have a certain kind of oppressive behavior?
I listen to some like, okay, is he saying that ending segregation brought the downward spiral of our fucking country?
Or letting blacks vote?
Is letting black people vote? And I'm sure that if we had this conversation, you'd be like, no, that's not what I meant. You're putting words in my mouth. But I question, I'm like, you have an hour. You have an hour-long video to be very clear with what the fuck you're saying. Mm-hmm. And yet you're choosing to be intentionally vague as hell. Mm-hmm. Ethan Simon for $10 says, watch John Doyle's MLK video.
Everybody wants us to watch it.
I know.
That video is super popular. So I'm assuming a lot of you really watched the John Doyle video and liked it. Mm-hmm. Thought he was on to something. Thought it was something interesting.
The John Doyle video, yeah, it has 100,000 views. So
150,000 views.
Right. He's got a big channel. That video. So I saw the John Doyle video. And I saw it was an hour long, and my thought was like, oh, he's going to have like a bunch of research. He's going to have a bunch of quotes. He's going to talk about something like that. I had never seen
John wrong.
Doyle. Wait. You skipped ahead. I never seen another John Doyle video. The only John Doyle thing I've ever seen before this was his debate with Blair White and Lauren blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Wachitsky?
Yeah, whatever her name is. And that was my only experience with John Doyle. So I see this hour-long video, and I'm like, oh, it's going to have a lot of information, a lot of quotes, No! It's like insane. It's insane to me that this video is popular. It's an hour-long video that has about 3 pieces of information. Okay? He only has 3 claims that he brings forward about why MLK is a secret commie. And he says them all within the middle of the video in 20 seconds next to each other. And then the rest of the video, 99% of the hour-long video, is just this fucking insane ramble. It's like, I've never seen someone speak in a run-on sentence that goes on for literally an hour. That goes fucking nowhere. It's all just the most vague, broad, conspiracy, like, I'm just listening. I literally thought I was listening to Second Thought again. It's the same, like, they literally talk the same. They have the same cadence, they have the same way of speaking, they have the same way of making these very broad, overgeneralized claims, which are based on fucking nothing. I couldn't believe how bad the video was. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was saddened.
He's way smarter than, you're supposed to walk away and go, he's way smarter than Martin Luther King, though. Obviously.
Yeah.
Because Martin Luther King was a pussy. That's the takeaway. Nonviolent, peaceful revolution. Pussy.
He kept saying Martin Luther King was a fake, was brought up by the government and the elites and was fake. And it's like, oh, okay. Do you have like a proof for that? And he's like, well, my proof for that is that MLK, supposedly copied his college thesis paper. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, what does it have to do with him being like, where's the proof that the government, the entity that was spying on him for fear that he was a communist, was also somehow supporting him and rising him up? Oh, I have no proof for that claim. I'm just going to keep just repeating it again and again and again for an hour. And I guess my audience is just going to believe me.
Yeah, they will. They want to believe that.
I was saddened that form of propaganda is so popular. To just say a bunch of bullshit, and that's all that matters. Just say a bunch of bullshit that people want to hear, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, works.
I guess it does.
Yeah, it's so.
Should we just talk about the? Should we just
by having to stick to the truth?
I guess we should just talk about the rest of the video because we're talking about it.
Do you want to bring it up? What do you mean?
The John Doyle video.
Well, we can't do that because we gotta do it in like a package.
Well, this is going to be part of the package.
Oh, it is. Okay.
We might as well move on. It's free flow, Adam. Okay.
Oh, okay.
We're not going to be squares
Okay.
held down by rules and restrictions.
I guess you're right. Let's
So
do it.
the only pieces of information that John, in an entire hour-long video, the only piece of information that John Doyle brings forward to why MLK is a secret commie is that first of all, he brings a fake Martin Luther King Jr. quote, which I don't 100% blame him because I've seen this fake quote repeated in a bunch of places. And it's that Martin Luther King said that capitalism is one of the great evils. He said, Martin Luther King in a speech said capitalism, militarism, and poverty or whatever, or three of the great evils. And if you actually find the speech, he didn't say that. He said materialism is one of the great evils. But somehow that gets warped into capitalism and repeated, and everyone just repeats the lie again and again and again. But so that was one piece of supposed evidence. The other piece was that the SCLC, an organization that MLK headed up for many years, after MLK died, 4 years after Martin Luther King Jr. dies, the SCLC or whatever it is, they team up with Angela Davis to try to help this crazy. And Angela Davis, who is a fucking crazy socialist leftist commie, they team up with her in support of this black woman who basically had a mental breakdown and shot her white boss at the IRS. And they supported defending her in this case.
Yes. They try to say racism was the cause, not that she...
Right. That's the proof that MLK was a secret commie. That 4 years after he died, the organization that he was with teamed up with Angela Davis, who is a communist, to defend this lady.
Yeah.
That's the evidence that MLK is a communist.
4 years is a pretty long time.
Yeah. I mean, all the speeches that MLK explicitly says communism sucks, that doesn't count. All the speeches that MLK explicitly says that he's pro nonviolence, that doesn't count either. That was John Doyle's other argument. MLK was secretly not nonviolent. The fact that the government was spying on MLK because they were afraid he was a communist, somehow that doesn't negate the conspiracy that the government and the elites were still propping him up intentionally because he was a communist, I guess.
Yeah.
And that it's just I was so triggered by how bad the video was.
So I have two spots that I bookmarked. One will play the clip from, and one I'll just mention. The first one is, so he, obviously fans of the show know we're all believe in moral foundations theory. The idea put forward by Jonathan Haidt that there are these moral foundations. He says the only thing that matters is loyalty. Loyalty. That's all that matters. John Doyle makes a declaration. Loyalty, God damn it. That's it. That's the only moral foundation that we need to focus on. And I had to laugh out loud because I'm like, could you build a single foundation morality on loyalty? I mean, isn't loyalty the thing that builds all of these autocratic regimes? I mean, basically you're putting your friends in power because they're the only ones you can trust, and they have no meritocratic skills whatsoever. You know, the police commissioner doesn't know how to make the streets safe.
Right.
He's only there to make sure there to make sure nobody offs the king.
Right.
Yeah. Loyalty is, you don't want to build an entire ethical system on one foundation. Loyalty. So, I mean, loyalty is important, but it's kind of ironic. And then the next thing he tells a story about a black friend that he had in school. And the thing that I found ironic about it is he forces this black and white culture thing that I have plenty to say about. So let's listen to the clip and we'll chime in.
This white woman in cold blood. So maybe nothing ever changes. Maybe black people have basically just been using racism as an excuse for their behavior, which is why they pledge allegiance to the left. The essence of left-wing political thought is...
See, so already he's set up he's categorized black people as having a certain kind of behavior.
Right.
How is this not the same thing as white people have a certain kind of oppressive behavior?
That's exactly the same.
I mean,
It's exactly the same.
I wasn't aware that everybody in a certain racial category had the exact same behavior.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I thought there was a diversity of behaviors over each
No.
category of human being.
The abdication of responsibility. It's never your fault. It's always something else. You're always a victim. You're always oppressed. It's always a poor environment, etc.
See, but that's kind of human nature, though, right? We all want to blame somebody else.
Yeah, that's
We have to fight
self-serving
against
bias,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Sure.
That exists in whites too.
Right. No, but see, if you want to criticize the left for relying on that crutch too much, that is definitely true.
Oh yes, definitely. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But to say that like that is the black behavior,
Yeah. Little sus.
And so even when all the policies that the left has passed in the last 60 years have put black Americans in an even worse position than they were 60 years ago, they still don't care. And they will still block vote for Democrats because their culture would rather blame racism than address its own problems. And I dare you to tell me that I'm wrong. And what's the answer to this from?
So he dares us to tell him he's wrong. Well, lucky for us, we don't have to tell him he's wrong because he's going to illustrate how he's wrong right now.
okay.
The right. Well, the left is actually being racist when they tell you that you need help to succeed because it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. Okay, but then what happens? They're still not succeeding. And the left gives them a good answer, which is it's because of white people and racism. Vote secured. And I did a whole hour-long this video, dissertation, whatever, debunking the idea of systemic racism, everything from slavery leading to poverty, to poor education leading to poverty, to police and judicial bias, everything. There's a ton of research. It's airtight. But no one wants to have an honest conversation about this. And it's a tired point, but it's true, because there's a bunch of black people in this audience who agree. But guess what happens when they try to bring this stuff up? Oh, you're an Uncle Tom. Oh, you're acting white. They literally get casted out. Like, I know that there are some leftists in Beverly Hills, California, who take issue with this. But when you go to public school 15 minutes outside of Detroit, you learn a couple things. And one of the things you learn is that black kids who want to pay attention in class, take advanced classes, do their homework, study for tests, they get told that they're acting white. And other black kids won't hang out with them. There were black girls at my high school who weren't.
So he's setting up a dynamic here where there's a white culture and a black culture. So it's basically playing in to the entire CRT narrative here, that white people have a certain culture that is about punctuality. It is about objective truth, all responsibility, all of those things. John Doyle is basically just the mirror image of CRT in this entire clip. He's saying that the black people are being castigated for embracing what they're calling white culture. Now, in my opinion, we have to break that narrative. If you want blacks to be able, black conservatives, and I feel terrible for black conservatives that they feel this social pressure from other blacks that are basically saying, we have this culture and that you're going outside of the culture. One of the luxuries of being white, one of the things that I think you could call a privilege is that we're not policing other white people to be the white culture. Okay. We have this idea that there's a conservative culture, a button-up culture, a be on time culture. And we have kind of a slacker, like live fast, die young, let's do drugs on the beach culture. Okay.
Right.
Both of those cultures exist just fine in white people. We recognize it. We understand that. But to pin the slacker, live fast, die young gangster culture on black people, it's wrong. I rebel at the idea of it. But it's not only being reinforced by John Doyle's black friend in this example here, it's being reinforced by John Doyle himself. He's the one saying that being on time and doing well in school and being in personal responsibility, he's the one framing this as white culture. Am I wrong here, Sitch? Does it not seem like that's what he's setting up?
It's weird because in the beginning of the clip, or from where we started, he's basically saying that, black culture is, not taking responsibility, is blaming everything on racism. It's, passing the buck. And he says, I think before, I don't remember if it's before this or after this, he alludes to this again by saying, if you went back in time and you called your grandfather racist, he would say, I'm not racist. I'm just judging people on the way their groups act.
Yes, which is
Which is literally
racism.
racism. But no, so he's setting this up that there is this like that black culture is this negative thing, and that black people are overwhelmingly part of this. And then he goes and criticizes the fact that, oh, when a black person tries to not behave in all these negative attributes, they get called white.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, but wait a minute, John, you literally set that dichotomy up yourself 10 seconds earlier.
Yes, and are reinforcing it constantly
And are
on your
reinforcing
show.
it constantly through this video. Yeah.
If you want black conservatives to be able to vote as black conservatives, you have to break this meme
Right.
that allows black liberals, progressives to go around and say that if you're a conservative, you're not black. Like Joe Biden literally said that in the last
Right.
election. Okay, this meme is pretty powerful. We should be working on destroying this meme.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the horseshoe. We criticize CRT strongly because, and James Lindsay brings this up. It was, I don't remember if it was Corey Bush or no, it was someone else in the squad. I forget her name. Like Ion Presley or something said this. She's like, we don't want black people that don't embody black voices. Okay?
Yes.
And what she means by that, this is the CRT idea that like, oh, black people have this collective, unique political perspective. And if you're not regurgitating this, woke Marxist, race Marxist view, then you're not really black.
Yeah.
You're a fake black person. You're an Oreo. And we fight against that, saying that this is a toxic idea that will destroy the country. And and then you have John Doyle apparently saying the same fucking thing.
I'm curious. I would love John Doyle to read Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals, because this is basically the argument that Thomas Sowell lays out in that book. He says, and it's so ironic too, because this live fast, die young gangster culture that is so prominent in rap music, that the white liberals are saying, no, that's all of black culture, doesn't even come from Africa. It comes from Ireland. It's a Southern culture that he traces back to the Irish, that American blacks basically adopted, and plenty of white rednecks adopt as well.
Yeah.
So
definitely, of course.
Linking these two cultures to skin color is something that we're all trying to fight against, something that we're all trying to avoid. Well,
that's
some
what
of us
we're
are
trying to fight against.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not trying to fight against us. And I mean, it's weird because throughout this video, I mean, he keeps complaining about liberalism in this video, and it feels like he's trying to trick conservatives that watch his show to be against liberalism, not like be against the liberals and the American liberal versus conservative, but against the concept of liberalism. He keeps specifically saying liberalism is bad.
Right.
And I don't know what he's advocating be replace it. I'm assuming based on his debate with Blair White, he wants some kind of weird, theocracy or something.
Yeah.
Where the government tells everyone what to do, and you have religion being shoved down, his version of Christianity shoved down everyone's throats about what can go on in the bedroom, what has to happen in school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's just white culture, Sitch.
I guess.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
Christianity.
he is trying to
Christianity based off of that Jew in the Middle East is white culture. It's actually hilarious because watching this video and listening to some of his criticisms about, like he brings up this criticism like, oh, I don't like all these George Floyd conservatives who say like, oh, I want to go back, before woke stuff happens. And they're so dumb because they don't understand that liberalism, allows the woke stuff to happen in the first place. And we hear this argument a lot from the neo-reactionaries that liberalism is going to inevitably lead to wokeism or communism, even though, America's been a country founded on liberalism for over 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I hear that argument and I read Julius Evola, and he literally makes almost word for word the same argument about Christianity.
Oh my God.
He's like, when he's railing against Christianity, he literally makes the same argument. He's like, all these fucking quote unquote conservative Christians, they want to go back to like the good parts of Christianity. The fools don't understand. Christianity is a problem. Christianity is the victim narrative, religion that's based off of this Semitic Jewish nonsense from the Middle East. We need to go back to before Christianity. We need to go back to the Hyperborean. We need to go back to the magical, Greek and Norse mythology. That's when men could be men and traditions were, and you're like, oh my God, it's like the same fucking talking point. It's so moronic.
The chat is correcting me. It's not Ireland, it's Scotland. So
there you go.
Thomas Sowell traces it back to Scottish culture. Thank you so much for correcting me in the chat. So let's let Doyle finish his diatribe here.
Weren't allowed to say the N-word because they acted white, which it's honestly kind of funny, but it's true. And it's a problem and no one wants to talk about it. I used to work at a Subway back in high school, and I worked with a woman who would take the bus up Woodward to get to the store. And for those unfamiliar, there's a road in Michigan called Woodward that runs from Detroit northwest up until Pontiac. And so she would take the bus from the city to work at our store. And then one day she bought a car. And then a couple months later, her car got stolen when it was like parked at her apartment or something. And so she comes into work and she tells my boss about it. She tells me about it. And my boss says something like, damn, that really sucks. Just unlucky, I guess. And she said, no, they did that intentionally because they were mad that I got a car. They were like targeting her intentionally because they didn't want her to succeed. And at the time, I thought she was just being paranoid. But I don't know. Maybe she was right, because every time I talk to black people about this stuff, I hear stories like this. But then when I talk to white liberals who think that they understand black culture because they went to a private school that had 2 black kids who, for all intents and purposes, acted like white kids and who, read the new Jim Crow in their social studies class, they tell me all the approved talking points. It is not their fault. It's because of different forms of institutional racism. It's the same way that during the civil rights movement, they were able to win the support of white people in the north and in the suburbs by showing them the footage of police spraying hoses at these activists. And they thought, oh, these poor people, they're just being targeted for no reason. And it was the people in the south who actually lived alongside them who were saying, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And we see the same thing now. It's always the white.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. So, I think we've heard enough. I think it's fascinating that he's I guess against this targeting people for acting differently outside of their culture, but he's a product that's facilitating it at the same time, which is just that's the thing. Like, you pick a side here, okay? Do you want people to feel free? Do you want to not, like, if you're labeling the entire black culture in this way, you're perpetuating the same problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and talking about cultural gravity, like the car thing, that's true, but that's the way all cultures are self-maintaining. That's what makes them cultures. And so there is, and we've talked about this a bunch. And James Lindsay's talked about this a bunch, with the Appalachian, poor white Appalachian culture, is that if you have a culture that arises out of being poor, or a culture that arises out of being, rebelling against mainstream society, then it's unfortunately going to start looking at success as betrayal, and people will target you for that. And that's what we're trying to dismantle. And it's that CRT is upholding that idea. Yeah, it's pushing that idea.
That's why we're so against it. So,
right.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I just, when he says like, oh, the people in the South Side is more complicated than that, I don't know. He does this thing that's really obnoxious too, which is he'll say like, oh, this is an hour-long video. Okay. He has ample time to give his thoughts on the matter, and he doesn't. And I can only assume that's for nefarious or malicious reasons, because he says a couple times in the video, I'm not against the entirety of what they were trying to do with the civil rights movement, but I'm against like most of it. Mm-hmm. And you listen to that and you're like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And then he spends 99% of the video talking about how the civil rights movement and the civil rights legislation were all, socialist communist infiltration that began the downward spiral of our country.
Right.
And so I listen to this, I'm like, okay, is he saying that ending segregation brought the downward spiral of our fucking country?
Or letting blacks vote?
Is letting black people vote? And I'm sure that if we had this conversation, you'd be like, no, that's not what I meant. You're putting words in my mouth. But I question, I'm like, you have an hour long video to be very clear with what the fuck you're saying. And yet you're choosing to be intentionally vague as hell. And you're choosing to allow your audience to interpret these very vague sentences however they desire. And I believe that's intentional.
So in his story, he talks about the black woman that he worked with who got the car and the black people that targeted her. Do you think all those people vote? Do you think all those are voters?
They don't vote. I think none of them vote.
Well, no, I think the girl that got the car might vote.
Yeah,
Definitely.
she does, but the people attacking her car, destroying
don't
her
vote.
They don't vote.
Yeah, but John Doyle has set up this situation where they're the base of the Democratic Party, the criminal black element.
Right.
Just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, I guess we can move on.
Yeah, we can move on. Destroying
don't vote. Yeah, but John Doyle has set up this situation where they're the base of the Democratic Party, the criminal black element.
Right.
Just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, I guess we can move on.
Yeah, we can move on.